Now let's go to the most serious and stuff that you pretty much take on exclusively, pretty much, is the general court martial. So let's talk about the consequences of a general court martial.
The consequences of a general court martial are life changing. That's the best way around it. Using the hurricane analogy, right? A low level tropical storm comes by. It's all fun and games till the power goes out. You lose your AC. You drink your case of Natty Light. Power goes back on, and you got a good story to tell, right? It sucked in the moment, but a Cat 5, a Katrina comes through, an Andrew comes through. It's going to be devastating, and the devastation is going to be, last for maybe even generationally. And so, if you have a general court martial, I mean, you're potentially facing life in prison. And that does happen. You can get life in prison at a general court martial, depending on the severity of the offense. You can get a 30-year sentence, a 40, 50-year sentence. Those don't happen nearly as much, but in child sex assault cases, you bet they do. You bet they do if you're accused of sexual assault against a child. And while that's a very heinous crime, there are extraordinary amounts of false allegations that are made, in those types of cases, right? And so you could be facing 45, 50 years of confinement. If it's if it is a non-child sexual assault, a sharp type of a case or separate type of a case, you may be doing 10, 20 years of confinement. That's a long time. It is a long time to put your life on hold and sit there in essentially behind bars while the world passes you by. So these consequences can be devastating, not just to you, but if you've got a wife or a husband and you've got kids. I mean, can you imagine, if you've got a 6-year-old at home and you do a 15-year stint, they're 21. They grew up without a dad, or they grew up without a mom. And that's devastating. That's generational. It really is. That's generational damage that's done. So, I mean, some significant confinement sentences. And what I'm seeing in the military more and more is that the confinement is going up and up and up. The days of the military giving incredibly light sentences, those days are, I don't say they're gone, but they're definitely going away. And we're seeing very harsh sentencing in the military. And I think when we start seeing more guidelines come into play down the road, that's just going to be higher and higher. So the consequences are very high. You're also going to lose your military career. Very few people leave a general court martial without getting kicked out. You're facing a dishonorable discharge or a bad conduct discharge. And even if the jury doesn't give you that, you're going to get administratively separated, with an OTH or a general discharge administratively. So it's going to be, unless you have a full acquittal, it's going to be the end of your military career. So there's all the financial loss of that. There's if you grew up in the military and this is all you know how to do, now what? And it's difficult to get hired why'd you leave the military? Well, I left through Fort Leavenworth. I wasn't stationed there, by the way. I was confined there. And so if, no kidding, you get a charge sheet and you go to the commander's office and you get a charge sheet and it has your name, your identity, your ID number, and it says what you're charged with, and it's a general court martial, that's serious. I mean, that is not anything to play games with. That's the Cat 5 hurricane that's coming at you. And if you're charged with it, it's not maybe it's going to come, maybe it's not. You're in New Orleans in the lower ward, and Katrina's coming. That's happening. And yes, you can survive that, but you don't want to be there. And so the consequences are dire. This is a very, very high stakes game that all of us are in. And I say a game, it's not a game, but it's a very high stakes. What we do is very high stakes. And so those are the people that call me and they say, hey, Tim, I've been charged with a sex assault. I've been charged with a child sexual assault. I've been charged with drug distribution. I've been, whatever it is. He said, and I always ask, do you have a charge sheet? Have you been charged? And if they say yes, and it's a general court martial, you can almost, the tone changes, because it really does, because I know that I'm talking to someone that's going to go through hell. It's going to go through war. And now my mindset starts changing. I say, okay, what is this person facing? We learn a little bit about his background. I wish you could hear a call that I do. Tell me about your background. What's your family scenario? And oftentimes I wonder why I'm asking this, because I want to know what the impact is going to be. And really before I even say, well, okay, how are we going to win this? Because that's a bigger question. So those are the cases I live for, because when we can take a general court martial for any of these offenses, which, I said, people that aren't in the business say, oh my God, how do you take these cases? Well, we take them because sometimes evidence is planted, like what we talked about earlier, right? And when you can take those and walk this service member into that battle and walk out the other side and win, you've had a direct impact on their life. And my life's been impacted too. Because I say, I'm doing noble work. I'm doing good work. I'm doing work that matters. And so that really makes a difference. And those are the cases that I'm most interested in taking on.